Hello and welcome to Cold Crit.
We're not called that yet.
Oh.
But it's our last episode under the old name of Untitled Podcast with Art.
I guess I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, I think so.
Fine.
If you want to know why we're changing it, listen to our last episode where we speak longer than we probably need to about why we would change a long title like Untitled Podcast with Art with way too many syllables into something a bit easier to say, like Cold Crit.
Cold Crit.
And something that has a bit of a broader meaning than Untitled Podcast with Art, which, is growing. It's a name that is growing along with this show.
Yes. Yeah, this is going to be the last episode where we're called Untitled Podcast with Art. Update all your feeds and stuff. Whatever you need to do to make sure that you don't miss when we change our name over to Cold Crit for real next episode.
I assume feeds work the same way where it'll just appear under a different name.
I think so, yeah. I just worried people are going to be confused. Like they'll suddenly be like, why am I following this Instagram account that I've never seen before in my entire life or something?
I mean, you're all smart. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Or you'll stop listening to us and won't even miss a beat.
Yeah, something like that'll happen.
So this is the second part of our discussion of the art made from the likeness of alleged healthcare CEO killer Luigi Mangione. Last time, Chris took us on a whole journey into Catholicism and iconography and AI and AI making icons of alleged CEO shooters. Something to add from last time when we were talking about the significance of the colors of the robes of Jesus, of different saints as depicted in icons.
Oh, the the robes that
Colors.
Yeah, Jesus is always depicted with having a crap, I forgot. It's a blue outer robe and a red inner robe, right?
I don't know.
Jesus robe.
That's a lot of AI Jesus. Oh, homunculus is an option there.
So, homunculus? What the fuck?
Go up, scroll up.
What is homunculus?
Tiny person.
Oh, yeah. It is one of those words where it looks exactly like what it represents.
It's also one of those words where, even though I've encountered it quite a bit in literature, I will never know if it's okay for me to say it in public. Okay, that baby.
That baby has an 8-pack.
The baby has a Luigi Mangione 8-pack.
That baby does not skip leg day.
What were you looking up?
I don't remember. Okay, yeah, it's Jesus is depicted as having a blue outer robe, red inner robe.
After that discussion, I got a text from none other than my mother saying, fun fact, Ray, the color of the robes in early painting. Ultramarine blue was from lapis lazuli and super duper expensive, so reserved for Mary and important saints. So, the lesser ones, like who was the one in the green that we saw?
Judas. That's why he got greened.
Well, not just Judas, but
not Judas. Jude. Gosh.
Jude, yeah.
I don't think Judas got to become a saint.
Said it before, we'll say it again. Not enough names in the Bible. It's like, they have all the crazy ones like, I don't know, Hezekiah. Mm-hmm. And then there's just like Jude, Judas.
Is being named Jude just kind of like being named James instead of James?
Do you know a James?
No, but why isn't that a name?
Oh, your name's Jane? Nope. James.
Yeah, that little fact I did know from like art history in college, but the part that I thought was interesting was that it was also like always a part of like the negotiation with patrons about how much of like gold and ultramarine would be used in those saint figures.
Which I imagine that negotiation is, okay, I'm going to commission a painting of Jesus and the saints because I'm so pious. I want it to tell people who see it that I'm pious, but also super wealthy.
Yeah. Can we make him like all gold and blue, please? And then the artist is just like, no, he'll look like a Smurf.
I mean, isn't that what Martin Luther said with his grievances, his theses against Catholicism? You made him look like Smurfs.
Made him look like Smurfs.
No, but this does seem to speak to some of his other complaints about Catholicism.
Yeah.
And flaunting wealth instead of, well, hundreds of years later instead of hiding it.
Yeah, and like behind the walls of the Vatican.
And in art.
Anyway. So today in this episode, we're going beyond the discussion of Catholic iconography to talk more about Mangione and the more imagery that has followed, like his perp walk, and how it fits into the tendency to project meaning onto our world via art and art history. When Mangione was extradited from Pennsylvania to New York to face murder charges, they did a big perp walk. What do you remember about the perp walk?
I remember Eric Adams was
he was there
just kind of like popping up, like to continue the Nintendo Mario metaphor here. He's just popping up behind Luigi Mangione and all the hyper military armed cops.
Oh my God, yeah.
Like Mario popping out of the green pipe.
Yeah, I know. Eric Adams, oh my God. Just showing up.
He doesn't even look happy to be there. He's like, wait, this is happening right now. Put me in there. Get me in there. Get me in the crowd.
Well, he's trying to look cool. And also he realized he didn't wear his Ron
DeSantis platform boots.
No, there was a meme about this image.
He looks short here.
In this image, the cop that's like, you've got the guy in the very front to his right with a big gun. And then you've got the guy looking like straightforward, like you can see his whole face. He's not wearing a helmet or anything. Between those two guys, there's a guy kind of like looking down wearing an NYPD hat. And he has on like these really like sneakerhead sneakers, like cost like thousands of dollars resale sneakers.
You can see that from this image?
Well, there were memes of it, so I know that.
Someone zoomed in and enhanced the sneakers.
There's red laces, and people were like, oh, he wore the...
his Off-White Air Jordan 5s.
Are those Air Jordans? Oh, I guess they are. Oh, Off-White. Yeah, okay. Off-White Air Jordans, yeah. So people were pointing out that one of the officers was wearing Off-White Air Jordans for the perp walk, which are like crazy. Those are like sneakerhead sneakers.
Took those out of the sealed vault.
Yeah, they're like, this is our day, baby. We've been waiting for this for a long time. Out of the
evidence locker.
Yeah.
I don't think he bought them for himself. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They've just been waiting there for a long time. Right next to
civil forfeiture.
Yeah. Yeah. Civil asset forfeiture. So yeah, it was a clown show. Like they had so much goddamn security for this one guy. They made him look like the Joker. They made him look like, so like the connection I made personally, I was like, are we doing this?
Hannibal Lecter and Sounds of the Lambs?
Yeah.
On the like,
the doll, the hand cart.
U-Haul moving rental dolly hand cart with the mask on.
It was just like total, the first like thing that came to my mind when I saw this image. Yeah. But other people made similar connections, and
as an Italian American, I bet he appreciates a fine Chianti.
Yes. And fava beans. I love this meme. It's showing Luigi Mangione right as he's getting out of a helicopter, and somebody says, okay, get some snaps of that Mangione character, but you better not pull any bullshit where he looks like the subject in a 16th century painting called Christ Taken in the Garden of Gethsemane. Ah, God.
Gethsemane?
Gethsemane.
I don't know.
Christ Taken in the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane?
Gethsemane?
We
We really need to. I know the UN isn't the thing the US does anymore, but we really got to get some kind of international council on how the fuck do we pronounce things from like antiquity.
Gethsemane. As a former lisper, this is violence against my people. That this cannot stand. Christ Taken at the Garden of Gethsemane. It's impossible. We're moving on.
When I think of the best Luigi memes, this is my favorite one. Because
the follow-up is, okay, now don't be mad, but, and then it's this picture of him looking like exactly like some sort of biblical figure.
Well, you showed me two images, and like he's almost always looking kind of, not so much in this one, but he's in one of the other ones with Eric Adams peeping over his shoulder. He's like always kind of doing that 3/4 profile thing where he's looking not quite at the camera, but like past it, which, I mean, everyone knows that's the way you look best because you get your jawbone in there.
Mm-hmm.
You also just look kind of biblical.
Yeah.
He's very calm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's super calm. The funny thing is, like, the New York Times told their reporters to cool it on, like, putting out cool images of Mangione.
Told them to go take a cold shower.
Yeah, they were like, we have to stop. And then the police went and did this whole perp walk. And they were like, well, what the fuck are we doing here?
I mean,
yeah. And so,
like,
yeah, people were making all of these like side-by-side comparisons. The internet was really quick to spot the similarities. We all had our fun with it. But like, it's just so funny to me that like people were like, well, you have to stop posting amazing pictures of this guy. And they were like, we can't.
Well, there's something interesting here. And this gets into a little bit of the research I was doing on this subject, which is the cultural function of the perp walk, especially in, American society, which Legacy Russell has written a bit about, what the perp walk means.
Legacy Russell, who wrote the book Glitch Feminism. You can find this book and like it's fairly popular these days. So
yeah, I love that book too.
Yeah.
So Legacy Russell's written a bit about perp walks and traces the lineage of them from the Puritan foundations of European American society to the present day. I'm going to read a bit here. Russell writes, the cultural practice of the perp walk is a form of social performativity. The perp walk itself is not a performance singular. Rather, it is a myriad of happenings, spectacles that are historically and ontologically specified. A genre of modern pop ritual recognized and claimed as an informal aspect of the judicial system, most specifically within the United States of America. The practice itself is somewhat an extension of Puritan practices of shaming, wherein public humiliation enacts its a pressure on an accused body within a public realm. During the Puritan age, the path from the prison to the scaffold, where the gallows loomed, was typically reserved for a body that had already been found guilty. Conversely, the contemporary use of the perp walk seems to serve a different purpose, signifying a shift in status away from ordinary citizen for individuals, often high profile, whose visibility would be of popular interest, a transformative ceremony that brands a body, preparing it for the formality of further conviction. So that view goes in the other direction, right?
Yeah.
A lot of writing around perp walks that I've found has been around like Harvey Weinstein's perp walk, this kind of dressing down of the individual to, taking them down from the mountain to the same level as all of us, which would be judging them as peers. But there's something that cuts the other way here, right? Like clearly that first definition, like the more Puritan definition, seems to be what the police and Eric Adams are going for here, right? I remember reading that, the symbolism there by having him in the orange jumpsuit surrounded by SWAT officers with more security than even more violent criminals.
Hannibal Lecter.
Have. Yeah, compared to looks like Hannibal Lecter there.
Superman.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he's going to just rip someone's throat out and eat them and leave him alone with any fewer than 3 guards. But it goes with that, the branding of him as an enemy of the state, an enemy of capitalism, as opposed to someone who murdered someone who happened to be an extremely rich, powerful man.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is interesting, the point you're making is, I'm pretty sure Mangione's lawyer is already arguing, how can my client be presumed innocent with this amount by any jury, with this amount of like treating him so out of proportion with who he is and like the crimes and things like that. Like he's not like a part of the head of a terrorist cell where he's like gonna be under threat of people like attacking the convoy or something. He is a guy who was, pretty much alone for the 6 months leading up to His crime, allegedly, we don't know it was actually him, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that's the same thing we get with like mugshots too. Like American culture has all of these things where it's like you're supposed to be presumed innocent until found guilty. But the perp walks, the mugshots, as we talked about in the Timberlake episode, are all there to confer a guilt by association with the criminal punishment system.
And I think what's of particular note about that image with the SWAT police, with Eric Adams inserting himself in the image there, in the context of everything we just talked about, like, to use a term that we've seen online quite a bit, the like folk hero of Luigi Mangione is it's hard not to view it as a calculated pushback to control the narrative here. It's saying that, you know, for every meme, for every AI image that proliferates on social media that shows this person as a saint, as for whatever reason, Jesus or some other saint, here is us as those in power, pulling our same tricks that we've used throughout, in recent memory, the war on terror.
Yeah.
To paint this person as, to reframe the narrative as, this is someone who fits within the story of, you know, the war on terror. This is someone who is an enemy of the people, being the American people, as opposed to a class struggle.
Yeah. And that's really important because like all of this visual culture stuff has a real point to it, which is like, it is this young man's life, you know, whether he's innocent or guilty, the federal government is charging him with like terrorism charges and things like that.
Right.
Like he is facing the death penalty, which normally in New York with a murder of this nature, he was charged with like second degree murder, because in New York, first degree murder has to be basically like a hate crime or terrorism or something like that to rise to the level of first degree. So the federal government was like, let's do that. And like, let's also do this perp walk in like the all the trappings of like how we would treat an extremely dangerous terrorist. Like, I just kind of remember you and I were in Paris when there was this trial going on for the the people who committed a terrorism. I kind of can't remember which one.
They did one terrorism.
Did they do the
maybe a few?
It might have been the Charlie Hebdo murders. It might have
or related to
been
that.
The one that was at the
Bataclan.
Yeah,
that was
maybe.
Older, but...
And all of the security and like couldn't walk on certain blocks. There were police just like questioning random passersby and things like that. It reminded me of that.
Machine guns.
Yeah. The level that was reserved for these individuals who had, you know, allegedly committed these acts. And it's like, we've got about the same for this like one guy who used a 3D printed gun to allegedly murder one person in a very calculated way. And it's not at all, even if you 100% believe he did it, it's not at all the same.
From my perspective, the responsible questions to ask here, when you compare this murder of one person to other clearly premeditated murders, what's different? Is it that he wrote a manifesto? Is it that he inscribed words on his bullet casings?
What's the difference?
That he killed an extremely wealthy person who, through his death, becomes a symbol of gross inequality that, well, I'll say it cuts across a lot of artificial political division in the US.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, people rightly point out that like, oh, what's his name who killed the people in 2020?
Which one?
Gosh, the right wing, he got off.
Rittenhouse?
Yeah, like that, like he killed people and the cops.
Real life big boy statue, Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah, and like the cops bought him like food at Burger King, and when arresting him, We never saw anything like that with him. And it's like, I don't know why the media refuses to call people like him terrorists and like, the school shooters and the Walmart shooters and the grocery store and the church shooters terrorists. But like, that's what they are. And they don't treat them the same. And like, we know why. It's patently obvious why. But like, it's important still to point it out sometimes.
Yeah, agreed. And we're not the first to say this.
No.
We're never the first to say this. We're a podcast that does stories that are 6 weeks at minimum old.
No, and like there's that one author at Hyperallergic who's always way ahead of us. Every time I get an idea, it's like the same day she's already written a story and is like, here's all the stuff. So just skip this podcast, go read her article. She's great. I hope one day we can have her on the show because we're like clearly on the same beat.
Your options here as a listener are you can either choose to read like a nerd, you can listen to our show,
nerd,
or if you want to be really economical about it, just use an AI reader to read Hyperallergic in audio format to you.
Yeah.
God, I hope they never get a podcast because you'll take all of our 10 listeners.
They need to bring us on as their podcast. It's Issa Farfan.
Yeah.
Farfan. I swear we're on the exact same wavelength. Like she's always writing up the articles I want to write, and she clearly has deadlines, and I don't. I get to record whenever I want to.
Exactly. That's the best part of podcasting in your living room.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything ever if you don't want to.
So there are a few more points I want to make here. And speaking of Hyperallergic, a different set of hyperallergic authors came up in some of the research I was doing. Earlier, when we were speaking about how there's this tendency for us to look at any visual culture and connect it to a tradition or a current of cultural imagery, there are other examples of this. Luigi Mangione being made into AI Saint Christ, whatever. It's not the only time this has happened recently. This is part of memes, for example. This is part of social media, but an article from Hyperallergic from 2016 from the Black Lives Matter protests. This one's particularly about one in Baton Rouge. And there was an image that a Reuters photographer took of Aisha Evans. Well, Chris, tell me, what do you see in this image here?
There's a Black woman and she is wearing a dress. The dress is sleeveless. So there's it looks like it's maybe just like a spaghetti strap or something. And then is about floor length with a slit up the side. It looks like she's wearing flats. It kind of just looks like a summer dress, like the kind of thing you would wear to go to brunch with friends or something. And I can't really see. It looks like she might have something in her hands, or maybe she's just like holding her hands together. And then she's standing in the middle of the road, and there are 2 officer cops in like full riot gear, like the whole thing, helmets, armor. And one has like a zip tie, cuffs in their hand. Maybe, I can't really tell from here. He might be grabbing her arm. But yeah, she looks she's just looking straight ahead. Her posture is very relaxed. And then behind the whole scene, you see a whole line of riot officers. And I think it's important to note just like the imbalance here. You have a woman who is essentially she's wearing very little, between her and the world, her body and the world is a thin piece of cloth. And these people have just so much armor between themselves and her. Their posture, the 2 that are confronting her, it's not relaxed. It looks very harried. It looks very like they've come up to her in a run or something like that.
Yeah, she looks like a statue. Like she's been there for a long time. And the officers, they look on edge, like they're moving.
Yeah.
Like they're not quite sure how to approach. They're approaching her almost like a wild animal or something. This image it made its rounds through culture in 2016, but I came to this recently through a Hyperallergic article from that year by Anja Mina and Ray Drainville. And it was taking the same approach that we've been talking about today of looking at how this image has been, been made into art and also compared to a tradition of religious painting and imagery.
Yep.
And guess which image was the first comparison?
I don't know.
Jesus Christ being arrested at the hands of armed soldiers in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Gethsemane. Sorry.
Yep. In the writer's words, his hands held out, already bound or waiting to be bound. The theme almost invariably portrays Christ standing calmly amidst a roiling storm of armed adversaries. More rarely depicted is the moment directly following, when Christ identifies himself and the Roman soldiers fall to the ground. This photo here, Reuters got this photo through Jonathan Bachman. The writer said, Evans uncannily evokes the liminal point between these two scenes. The awkward stance of the police suggests imminent collapse. And that's what you were saying, right? This person looks like a statue.
Yeah.
My assumption, she was standing there in a form of performance or protest or both. And the officers approached her, with zip cuffs and everything.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out the clothing choice because gender expression through specific choices of clothing has long been an important part of how women protest, and the playing into femininity, play by using clothing is a way that women can, in particular, people who express themselves as women can show stark power imbalances and shine a light on them when you are in the face of like an over militarized police.
Got the cuffs at the ready.
Yeah, they're ready. And it's like, ready for what? For this lady in a dress? And like, that's 100% intentional. She didn't get up that day and was like, I'm going to go to the store. And then, oh no, I met with this line of riot police. It's like, it goes back to like Rosa Parks.
Mm-hmm.
There were bus boycotts happening. There were people doing protests and stuff before that. Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to move to the back of the bus, but they said, you are a very nice looking lady. You're going to put on your nice clothes and you're not going to move to the back of the bus. And yeah, I just think it's important to point out like these things are never accidents. The performance of femininity in these cases is entirely intentional.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that the authors get to a bit later in the article, too. I mean, they say this type of imagery, it's something that has run through a lot of our cultural consciousness throughout centuries, even. Within the past century, they say, consider Neo halting Agent Smith's bullets in The Matrix, or any number of movies where antagonists square off against one another. There are often contests between an individual with moral and sometimes supernatural authority against an individual whose authority is backed up by violence. Such scenes are frequently choreographed so that the actors face each other in profile, parallel to the screen. As viewers, we've been trained to view confrontations in this manner without even realizing it due to repeated composition.
Yeah.
That calmness there, I mean, I would not be surprised to see that this is a, protests are always in some form choreographed, right? They're about communication, about messaging.
The visual spectacle.
Exactly. This is here, and that's why this image is powerful. But another point that they make to kind of close out this discussion of this image here is that a lot of art was made at the time. I tried to bring it up, and in the span of me first pulling this article last month and coming back to it today before we recorded, all those images that were posted on Twitter, X, no longer available.
Oh, yeah.
The easy explanation is a lot of people who are at all plugged into news or politics and who don't have sharp right-wing leanings left Twitter.
Yeah.
Another possibility is they were taken down or quote unquote content moderated for having, or saying BLM or something.
Yeah.
Snowflakes. But what they say here is, in their words, social media has dramatically shortened the time frame between permutations of any image that captures the public imagination. Within days of the Aisha Evans photo, the Reuters one here, being posted online, the photo had lent itself to a number of illustrations and mashups posted to social media by those inspired by this image of steadfast resistance in the face of physical power.
Yeah, the same sort of like cycle, the same sort of like timeline that we see with like the Mangione images. Of course, we have more of a development of the story. I don't know what happened to her. Do you?
No,
I mean, I assume she was arrested and I assume she was released.
I did not get that
no
far,
charges because that's how these things often go. You know, it's who knows.
Get a mugshot, get a fine.
Yeah.
Ruin someone's life, whatever.
Yeah, you know, hopefully she didn't talk to the cops. Never talk to the cops.
Here's just worth pointing out that it's not just people making drawings and putting them on TikTok or Twitter. Like this is a shepherd fairy image, like an obey giant, which, you know, leads into the commercialization part of this. But
Simon, who is Shepherd Fairy?
You all know Obey, the clothing brand?
Yeah, but, you know.
Yeah.
We're not a highfalutin podcast. We explain everything.
Shepherd Fairy is the artist most known for kind of like Russian constructivist, I guess, style silk screens of, I'm getting to it. God. Oh my God. He's a constructivist. I can't listen anymore.
No.
He made the Obama Hope thing.
There you go.
But he was doing stuff for
He's so
decades
much more than
before
that. He's so much more than that.
He had Obey Giant, the clothing brand, Andre the Giant before that.
Obey is like a sort of like a hype beast brand, right?
Yeah, it was like a very early hype beast kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like before the term hype beast.
Yes.
You would see a lot of these, like this crossover of fine art, street art, and like designer clothing.
Yep.
And Shepherd Fairy would do a lot of these.
Oh, like Cause?
Sure. I'm not taking a stand on that one.
I will. I hate it.
When I was 20, really liked Shepherd Fairy.
Oh, I wasn't talking about Shepherd Fairy. I was talking about Cause.
Yeah, that's why I'm not keen to draw that comparison.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because as we know on this podcast, Cause is like balls. Chris's words.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Also, just fact, you can look it up on Wikipedia.
She's editing. I can see her on her iPad editing the Wikipedia page right now. Yeah, Shepherd Fairy, most known for the Obama Hope screen print portrait, also did the ones in response to the first Trump administration's Muslim ban with the Muslim woman, you know, about everyone's accepted here. Anyway, he made an image here, which was very much in the style that kind of photocopied 2000s era street art image of this image of Aisha Evans, you know, as an effort to solidify this as a cultural icon.
Yep.
So this was 2016.
Yep.
This is
early BLM.
Yeah.
You know, this is Ferguson times.
It's been a while. The cycle's been a bit longer. There's been a lot of things written about BLM, about these images. It's been more diffused. The Mangione thing is much more recent.
Yeah.
But I think something that's worth pointing out here is that in the case of Mangione, there is much more of a personal story with it, right?
Yeah.
This image has someone who the media, social media, any of us who've been online have picked apart, you know, about trying to build that narrative in a way. And there is there's quite a bit of struggle over what that narrative is. We talked about the Perp walk image.
Yeah.
We've also talked about, you know, the sanctification of, as some would say, Saint Luigi.
Sorry, quick clarification. Sanctification refers to the purifying of the body, like the spirit, and is a thing that we can
what do you call when someone's a saint?
Canonization.
Canonization.
Yeah, there's a difference. Sorry, that is something I learned the hard way, so I just felt like I needed to clarify it because I kept using sanctification and canonization interchangeably, and then was like, I can't do that. It's not allowed. Everybody can sanctify themselves and should and
so like
would
every morning
strive to.
I sanctify myself and take a bath, shower.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
or like say your
morning.
prayers or
it's
something.
Every morning.
It's struggle. It is the like
your ablutions,
determination to become like a better version of yourself, essentially.
All right, I'm going to back up there. Why is it on me to know this?
It's not. I'm the knower of Catholicism now in this household.
You know, the canonization of Saint Luigi, etc.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to add one more thing. Canonization is a formal process by the Catholic Church.
By the internet. Okay.
No.
I feel it's worth bringing a bit more perspective into this because
sure.
A thing I feel like we will always struggle with talking about the internet and politics in the US is, you know, where we align with things. And I would say that there was a time not so long ago, and I felt differently from this, but I feel like we we've seen a lot of really intense energy with, I won't say social movements, I'll say social media movements that feel kind of ridiculous with, the fog of Kofifi kind of thing, where like we made a big deal out of this and a day later we're re-examining that. This is someone who turned righteous and very relatable anger into violent action. I may find the jubilance on social media in response to that act enticing, but I also recognize that like that is an extreme move.
Minus his reading list, because oh my God.
I do feel it's worth pointing out that
won't catch that. My Goodreads looking like that.
There's been some interesting scholarship and writing from people who have for decades studied class struggle and movements on what this actually is. Mm-hmm. And there's a recent article in eFlux that was from the Italian philosopher Franco Bifo Berardi. This person writes a lot about the clusterfuck we find ourselves in culturally in terms of like, class and all that. But what he's saying is this is someone who 10 years ago wrote a book about mass shooters and this tendency to collapse idea to action within the hyper accelerated media and information landscape we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
He wrote an article that is looking back at that work and saying things have changed a bit in the past 10 years. Let's look at new examples. One of them is Luigi Mangione. And he's quick to call out that whatever you feel, we should not view this as an entry in a tradition of class struggle. His words are, yes, my heart beats for him, like the hearts of many millions of others who detest neoliberal atrocity. I too hope that Luigi Mangione would manage to escape arrest before a McDonald's clerk, much poorer than he, called the police and had him arrested. His act has been hailed on social media, and many have identified with his hatred for the exploiters. Should we say that his action, the elimination of a scoundrel who profits from the illness and misfortune of the unfortunate inhabitants of the most miserable country in the world, was an episode of class struggle? Nonsense. So what he's saying here is that this act, murdering what are you smiling about?
Italians talking about Italians.
Yeah. It's okay for me to talk about this American because I'm Italian and he is Italian.
Yeah.
And he writes his manifesto with his fingers pinched together and the pen pointed at the paper.
Yes.
But what he's getting at here is that, to put it in plain terms, rather than class struggle, this killing is closer to an act of, in his words, impotent rage. So another quote is, devoid of friendship and complicity, devoid of a collective project of emancipation, hatred is not a class struggle. It is chaotic revenge against the fate of having been born into the ferocious age of what he calls liberal Nazism. Exploitation, conscience, solidarity, shared projects, all of this has disappeared from the language of contemporary avengers. Pain, humiliation, and anger are individual feelings, and they remain individual even if shared by millions who go individually to vote for an avenger in chief, referring in this case to Trump. So there's something unifying here about like, yes, this act seems to cut across what I'm calling here artificial political lines. Whichever way you vote, a lot of people identify with what Mangione allegedly did here. But this writer is saying that his act is a symptom of a hyper-individualized, isolated society. And so it makes me wonder what it says about our abilities to organize and to fight injustice when the people we see, getting turned into images of Catholic saints are lone wolf killers.
Yeah, I think that as, especially Americans, like, we have this like extremely individualistic view of protest, of resistance, of like what activism means. Like people, I often hear people say like, I don't know what to do. Like it's all on them and like not a part of like a bigger thing. Like everybody's got a little role to play. I think you see this a lot with like how certain figures from like the civil rights era are idolized, like Rosa Parks. I mean, incredible woman, but like she was one of many, many people involved in doing those kind of like, I refuse to move to the back of the bus sort of. But we put these people on a pedestal and outside and divorce them from the larger context of the movements they were involved in. And I think that even by like turning Mangione into a saint in this imagery, it's like not only are you like making this like action, like viewing it through this hyper individualistic lens, we're also then starting to view it through this idea of like people who do these kinds of things are saints, and I'm no saint. So I could never, I mean, yes, I could never do anything like that. I don't think I have it in me.
If only you were more of a saint.
Yeah, I know. And I don't, necessarily think that that's the way forward, but I do worry about, like all these messages we're absorbing all the time about how like action is only a thing undertaken by the like very special kind of people.
Yeah. There are a lot of words for that. One of them is like celebrity, or in this case, like retroactive celebrity.
Yep.
Going back to a little bit ago when, we were talking about the perp walk image of Luigi Mangione and controlling the narrative, there is so much AI or otherwise, there's so much just written and created in the social media sphere about this image and about the symbol that they're making this act, whether he did it or not, into. Something when I was looking into, what's the history of perp walks, and especially what's the history of using them to, influence a public narrative, whether it's mugshots or it's an opportunist politician like Eric Adams inserting himself into this super militarized Hannibal Lecter, transportation of an accused prisoner.
Yeah.
And came across this paper from 2011 by John Paul of Washburn University, which I've learned is in Topeka, Kansas. I have a soft spot for these very kind of artistic and humanities approaches to, history, art, or science, or anything. But this is someone who was taking a look at the photographs that came out of the Abu Ghraib prison, or U.S. military prison in Iraq during the Iraq War, during the War on Terror, and the scandal that broke out about the self-documented by the perpetrators abuse of suspects and prisoners there. It's a paper that was seeking to take back the narrative that was put forward by the U.S. government at the time, a narrative that was looking very hard to portray Muslim men as others, as terrorists, etc. That was in response to the very understandable public outrage about U.S. soldiers just clearly abusing and delighting in abusing a lot of hooded, masked Iraqi civilians who naked, electrocuted, whatever, horrible stuff. But the way this person was seeking to take back that narrative was, instead of like, as a contrast to, as various other writers have said, the U.S. government was making an effort by, one, saying all the people who did this were bad apples, not indicative of the rest of the U.S. Army, but also putting forward these images that had already come out as very dehumanizing images, right? No one has a face. There's a line drawn that is like, these people are not people like the rest of us. And so what John Paul of Washburn University was doing here is did a review of the literature, did a review of everything that had happened. This is 2011, so it's years after this had happened, and comparing those images instead to religious imagery. Mm-hmm. And this is what you've been seeing here with the BLM image of Aisha Evans being arrested, of all those images that you showed of, Luigi Mangione being portrayed as a Catholic saint, or for whatever reason, as a deity. And there's something interesting about that approach, right? Which I had to dig up this article. It's not like a very prominent thing, but the author was saying that this is not anything that's remotely scientific, but as a way to push back on that narrative. And I found that to be interesting.
Yeah.
So it's just one more rung in that like tradition of, let's look at the way these images are used. Let's look at why they're used that way in media and popular culture, but also look at other ways things can be subverted. And this was at a time when we weren't seeing the gross proliferation of user-generated content via TikTok or anything else.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to imagine what would have the like media landscape if Abu Ghraib would have happened in the TikTok/Instagram era. And maybe that says something about why it was banned and then unbanned.
Abu Ghraib or TikTok?
Both.
Oh my God, is Abu Ghraib still there? It's still there. Anyway.
I don't know. Guantanamo's still there, right?
Yeah. To wrap us up here, I want to look at something with a little more historical distance, something enough historical distance for it to be, I guess, more comical than BLM arrests or Abu Ghraib. But there is a bit of a tradition in art history of painting arrests and using it as a way to fit certain cultural, political narratives. One of them...
I went down this rabbit hole too.
Yeah. I had to cut way back on it, but
yeah.
One of them is a painting by Robert Alexander Hillingford in the late 19th century of the arrest of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette at Varennes. This is depicting part of the French Revolution when the royalty fled.
Is this even historically accurate? I thought they were captured in a carriage.
I don't know.
Like they were like disguising themselves, but people were like,
so in this image, they're not in a carriage, but they're in an inn. Yeah,
they're in an inn.
You want to describe it a bit more?
So you can see a figure at the forefront, a woman sitting at a table that is only like it's got a half tablecloth on it. She's dressed in, for the time, maybe in what I would assume are traveling clothes, though I never really know what that means when people say it in like books and stuff. I'm like, what the hell is a traveling cloak? Just have one cloak.
It's jammies for a carriage.
Yeah. And she's sitting at the table, like head in hand, like elbow on the table, looking like really bummed out. There's a guy directly across from the table from her. He's got a little floofy ascot, a vest on. He's like looking kind of like down, looking kind of like, what? I don't know. And then there's a few other people in the image that I don't know who they are, what they're doing here. And then similarly at the forefront, I'm just going to concentrate on the figures at the forefront. There's a man wearing a red jacket holding what looks like a stick.
I think it's a pistol or a truncheon. He's the fuzz.
If he's holding a pistol, it doesn't look like a pistol.
But he's wearing red, yeah.
But he's wearing red. He's wearing a black little like 3-point hat, knee-high boots, very sexy, and is kind of like looking towards the people seated at the table. There's multiple like children in the background. The door is ajar and there's a crowd gathered outside. There's kind of like a boy wearing a hat and like rags peeking in. And also at the front of the image, there are like bags on the ground, though they're not like super well defined.
Because they've been traveling.
So,
clearly a lot to pick apart in this image. Not going to get into all of it. It's Louis XVI during the French Revolution, King of France, fled because they were worried about getting guillotined.
Yep. And yet they still got guillotined.
Yeah. So this image is their arrest. And what's interesting about this one is, this was painted about a century after the fact. The description of this painting from the museum website where they pulled it from is, in Hillingford's cleverly constructed scene, the king, though dressed in the drab brown frock coat of an attendant, it's his disguise, inadvertently gives away his true identity by standing with, quote, hidden hand, the unmistakable expression of nobility and gesture of absolutism. So what they're referring to is he's got his hand tucked into his jacket, kind of like you would see Napoleon do as well.
The guy in the brown coat is Louis. Yeah. Okay. I was like, that guy in the tan doesn't look like Louis.
There's obviously this is a fictional image. It's historical fiction essentially, but it fits a narrative of the past, right? Where I just thought it was funny that in this version, the idea here is that this king was so fucking stupid. He could not stop behaving like a disconnected royal to the point where he gave himself away by standing the wrong way.
Love it.
By standing like a rich fuck in front of the revolutionaries who came to cut his head off. 18 months later, he lost his head to the guillotine, and Marie Antoinette, who's the woman in front here, followed 9 months after him.
Yeah, and she looks quite she does not look like Marie Antoinette as we know her, with her updos and her fashion.
She looks like she's been flying for about 12 hours.
Yeah. Similarly, on the whole French Revolution theme, when I was researching this episode, I came across a whole bunch of paintings of what's his name? Robespierre. What's his first name?
Maximilien
Robespierre. Okay. So I came across all these images of Maximilien Robespierre. He was like a really influential, controversial figure of the French Revolution.
Got a lot of people's heads cut off.
Yeah. A leader of it. So many people's heads cut off. And I came across so many images of his arrest and looking.
This looks like those images we would see like 10 years ago of like South Korean parliament or whatever, where they're just beating each other with stacks of paper.
I know. But yeah, just on the similar subject of like the French Revolution and stuff.
I feel like what we're both getting at here, though, is that there is a tendency and an effort to portray arrests, to legitimize them or to delegitimize them.
Yes, absolutely.
Depending on who's creating the image.
Yep, absolutely. And like, that is what, the whole role of the mugshot, the perp walk is to create narrative. And, it's up to the people to create counter narrative, but it's definitely not through AI art, which is not good and doesn't understand its references at all.
Doesn't show its work.
Yeah.
Worst bibliography.
Honestly, yeah, that's what we need. Just show your goddamn work. Yeah, I think that like a big thing that I've been thinking in like creating doing the research for this episode is like good art takes an incubation period.
Mm-hmm.
And like the promise of AI is that like you get it fast, you get it now. And like I know people will argue like, well, these are just memes. But like memes are serious visual culture. They define, they set the tone for our lives. They are the type of art we interact with the most, for better, for worse. And I feel like the introduction of AI has like just been a net bad for visual culture.
We're talking about collapsing that time between whether it's about images and art being made of them and posted to social media, like they were talking about that Hyperallergic article about the BLM protest, whether it's about the collapsing of idea and action, like Franco Berardi is talking about, with people who kill in cold blood with dubious political connections. What we're seeing with technology, what all these people are kind of getting at is that time, that incubation period is shortened. And I would argue something important is lost there.
Yeah. I mean,
however you feel about technology, there is something that's lost there.
Yeah, I mean, just the way that memes have become so quick to turn around. Like, me again, like I think we've referenced this in early other episodes, but like meme is not strictly a piece of internet culture. It is the original like Dawkins kind of definition is like it's a piece of larger cultural ephemera. And the internet simply sped up the process of creating cultural ephemera. It sped up the quantity that can be produced in any given time. And now AI has once again shortened that time. And it's not good. The output's not good.
But it is fun.
It's fun.
And there's something to that. And so to close this out on a tangentially related but lighter note is I'm doing my research on like, what are some cases where images of arrests or perp walks or anything have been compared on a larger scale to religious or, classical art. In the UK, I don't know if you know this, they like to drink and to be very drunk publicly.
I do know this as I've been to the UK.
Yeah. I mean, not all of them, whatever, parody. But
no, whatever.
There is a thing I've learned there called Black Eye Friday, which is...
Yep.
You know about this?
I mean, it's more just the words in that specific word order make 100% sense to me.
I feel like so many cultures...
I worked with British people. Yeah. I understand completely.
So many cultures have a version of this, whatever you call it, but that Friday before Christmas when everyone's off work and at home getting pissed because they don't want to hang out with their families anymore.
Yeah.
There's just like apparently an astronomical number of public disruptions, arrests, etc. for public drunkenness.
Public nuisance.
And there seems to be a bit of a cycle of images taken by either journalists or bystanders of drunk people in the UK, drunk men in the UK getting arrested, where they're either the people being arrested are intentionally trying to make it look like that, like they're in a religious image, like the image on the right up here.
Yeah, the image on the right, the guy looks like he's posing.
Oh, he's absolutely, that one is fairly famous there, but that's a photo by Joel Goodman of a drunken man on Manchester Street trying to pose like David. Like there are a couple, there's one other person in the foreground being arrested here, but this guy is either already been arrested or saw this happening, wanted to pose in front of it. Clearly very drunk, posing like David.
Love it.
It's a viral thing in the UK. On the left is a more recent image in Swansea, I think it's pronounced, in Cardiff. A photo by Dimitris Legakis. It was an image of another man being arrested on that day I talked about, Black Eye Friday, which was compared culturally at the time, social media, and by whatever those like middle-aged British guys who just seem to write whatever thoughts cross their mind in The Guardian as columns, which is not like a thing we see in a lot of mainstream media here in quite the same way.
No, I mean, not mainstream, but it's like, yeah, it's in like the local papers.
Yeah, but like The Guardian has these kind of
the Guardian has kept up the tradition.
Middle-aged British men who want to say like, that's not art, that is, or this sucks, that doesn't. Like the Andy Rooney tradition that we've previously had in the US, but this image is just, it's was compared to the raft of the Medusa, like so many crowd scuffles are, because there's someone being pinned down by three officers, identifiable by their fluorescent orange vests on that day, Black Eye Friday. And it was such a struggle and spectacle that a bunch of people there's some nicely dressed women clearly coming from a cocktail party. There's someone just standing right in front of them, kind of like looking down and like smirking. There's someone in front who is laying down, like leaning against one of the police officers, taking a selfie with all of them, and someone else taking a photo behind them. It's like, you were just one of the many cameras in this image. And there is something that does feel perspective wise and like scene wise. And going back to that idea of like these different perspectives in like old timey paintings, like in medieval paintings, where anywhere you look, it's its own vignette. It feels like that's what's going on here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like if you look over there, it's like, oh, you see the selfies. I see the people enjoying a meal. I see the guy. Yeah, he's selfieing. Yeah, it's great. I love it. And yeah, now we just need every little vignette to be like stylistically very different. And we have a great painting, a classic.
Pop it into AI and see what comes out.
Yes, that's a good idea. I bet it will do a good job and not make extremely confusing art history references.
It's going to make them all Jesus.
Yeah, everyone.
It's like that scene in Being John Malkovich, where John Malkovich goes into the John Malkovich tunnel and everyone is John Malkovich.
Yes. That's the future of AI. If we keep feeding it its own outputs.
It will be John Malkovich. I think it'll just be yourself everywhere.
Jesus will equal John Malkovich.
Yeah, we're getting close to some definitions of hell.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we should close this out. But Chris, you want to take us out here?
And that's going to be it for this episode. This has been Untitled Podcast with Art. For the very last time under this name, will be Cold Crit for our next episode. I'm Chris.
I'm Simon. If you like what we're doing and saying, please subscribe to us on YouTube or Spotify. And you can see some of what we're saying because you get full access to video slide episodes of all of our shows. We put the images of what we're talking about on the screen. It doesn't move a lot. You can check it if you're just curious what we're looking at while we're talking to you. You can also find just audio versions on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at untitledpod. That'll change soon. We'll let you know what it's going to change to. And if you like what we're saying, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/untitledartpod.
Our theme music is by Layers and Layers. And you can find us online right now at untitledpod.art. Actually, you'll still be able to find us online there because we'll just forward the address. So, yeah, that's it. Bye.
Bye.